The Great Unfinished Sentence. Chapter 1. On the night they met again, the orchestra was playing something tender and forgettable. People moved around them in soft black clothing, carrying champagne, discussing politics, illness, grandchildren, the ordinary debris of aging. Then Julian saw her standing near the far wall beneath a painting neither of them had ever liked, and the entire evening collapsed inward. Because there she was at 68, the great unfinished sentence of his life. He recognized her first by posture, not her face, not immediately. It was the way she stood slightly apart from the crowd, one hand folded loosely over the other, as though she had spent years teaching herself how not to need too much space. The same posture she'd had at 26, waiting without appearing to wait. Julian stopped walking. Someone beside him was still speaking, a man from the foundation board, something about funding, endowments, a museum wing in Hartford. Julian nodded automatically, though he heard none of it. Across the room, Evelyn turned her head slightly, laughing at something a woman beside her had said. Then she saw him. The laugh disappeared first. Not dramatically. It simply faded as if someone had lowered the lights inside her. For a moment, neither moved. At their age, shot became very quiet. The orchestra continued behind them. Glasses touched. Someone nearby coughed into a napkin. Life, indifferent as weather, went on arranging itself around catastrophe. Julian excused himself without knowing what he said. He crossed the room slowly, not from caution, from disbelief. Evelyn watched him come toward her with an expression he could not entirely read, not anger, not warmth either, something more difficult, recognition sharpened by restraint. "You're late," she said when he reached her. It startled a laugh out of him. "That's what you say to me after 40 years? 42, she corrected. He looked at her carefully then. Age had refined her rather than diminished her. Her hair, once dark copper, had gone silver at the temples, fine lines gathered around her mouth. But her eyes remained exactly as he remembered, intelligent, unsentimental, dangerous to a man who mistook calmness for surrender. He realized suddenly that his hands were cold. "You look well," he said. "I practice for the occasion." "That sounds like you." "Yes," she replied. "It probably does." A silence opened between them, not empty, crowded. He became aware that Evelyn was holding a champagne glass she had not touched. Her thumb moved slowly against the stem. "You live in Boston now?" he asked. "Most of the year. You still paint?" "Sometimes." "That means no." She looked at him then directly. "That means sometimes." Before he could answer, a tall man approached Evelyn from behind and touched lightly at the small of her back. "There you are," he said. "I thought perhaps you'd escaped." Then he noticed Julian. The man was handsome in the durable way some older men are handsome. White hair, clear eyes, expensive suit worn carelessly enough to suggest actual wealth. Evelyn turned slightly. "David, this is Julian Hart." The name landed softly but visibly. David extended his hand. "The architect." Julian shook it. "That accusation still follows me around, yes. I've heard your name for years," David said pleasantly. Something flickered across Evelyn's face, too fast to interpret. Julian released the man's hand. "I hope only in legal contexts." David smiled politely. "Mostly charitable ones." There it was then. Husband, not new, not fragile, established. Julian felt the knowledge settle into him with surprising force, though he had expected it. Of course she was married. Of course another man had occupied the decades Julian abandoned. Evelyn glanced toward David. "You should go rescue Marianne from the donors before she sets herself on fire." David leaned down and kissed Evelyn lightly on the cheek before moving away again into the crowd. The gesture was intimate precisely because it was ordinary. Julian looked after him for a moment. "He seems decent," he said. "He is." That sounded defensive. "It wasn't meant to." "No," Julian said quietly. "Probably not." The orchestra shifted into another piece. Outside the tall windows, rain slid through the city in silver bands. Museum lights reflected against the glass, blurring everyone into moving ghosts. Julian took a breath. "I almost didn't come tonight." "You almost never came anywhere," Evelyn replied. There it was, not bitterness, worse, accuracy. He lowered his eyes briefly. "You still do that," she said. "What?" "Look away when you know I'm right." And you still say things no one else would dare say out loud. No one else earned the privilege. He laughed once under his breath. God, he had missed her mind. That was the humiliating truth of it. Not merely her beauty, though she had once possessed the kind that altered a room's temperature. Not even what had happened between them all those years ago. It was the particular precision of being seen by her, the impossible relief and danger of it. You disappeared, she said after a moment. Not accusing now, merely continuing, he nodded slowly. Yes, I waited for an explanation for a very long time. I know. Did you? He met her eyes again. No, he admitted. Not really. The honesty surprised them both. Across the room, someone called Evelyn's name, but she ignored it. Julian could feel his pulse in his throat. Ridiculous at his age. He had buried a wife, survived surgeries, negotiated buildings worth millions. Yet standing beside Evelyn again made him feel like a man who had arrived somewhere unprepared. I heard about Caroline, Evelyn said softly. His wife's name entered the space between them with almost physical weight. Julian looked down at the floor. 2 years ago. I'm sorry, he nodded once. She suffered at the end? A little? Evelyn studied him carefully. You loved her. Yes. The answer came easily, truthfully. But another truth moved silently beneath it, old as bone. Evelyn turned the untouched champagne glass slowly in her hand. I used to wonder about her, she admitted. That seems unfair to everyone involved. It was. You met once. At your lecture in Chicago, I remember. She was beautiful. She was kind. Evelyn smiled faintly. That sounded rehearsed. It's what people say after someone dies. And is it true? Julian hesitated. Yes, he said finally. Mostly. Evelyn's eyes softened then, though only slightly. That's a terrible answer. It's the honest one. For the first time since he crossed the room, she looked genuinely moved. Not because of the words themselves, because he had finally become old enough to say them. A waiter passed carrying fresh glasses. Evelyn exchanged hers for another she still did not drink. You stopped drinking champagne in Paris, Julian said suddenly. She blinked. You remember that? You said it tasted like expensive loneliness. A silence followed, longer this time. Some memories do not fade. They wait. Paris, 39 years ago. Rain on narrow streets. A hotel room with unreliable heat. Evelyn standing barefoot at the window while traffic moved below like veins of light. The terrible, radiant period before he ruined everything. You vanished 3 weeks after that trip, she said quietly. I know. No letter, he swallowed. Yes. No explanation. No. Do you have one now? Julian opened his mouth, closed it again. Around them, the gala continued in warm gold light. Laughter rose from distant corners. A woman in pearls was describing Tuscany to someone who clearly did not care. The orchestra played on with professional indifference. Evelyn waited. Julian realized suddenly that whatever answer he gave next would matter more than anything he had said in decades. Not because it could repair the past, because it could finally name it. I was afraid, he said at last. Evelyn's expression did not change. Of what? He smiled sadly. You mostly. That's convenient. It's true. You were 40 years old, Julian. I know. You had already built half your career by then. Yes. And yet apparently a woman in a gray coat terrified you. You weren't frightening because I didn't love you, he said softly. You were frightening because I did. The words settled between them. No music now, no crowd, no rain, just that. Evelyn looked away first. Her throat moved once before she spoke. That's not enough, she said. No, it wasn't enough then either. I know, he watched her carefully. I thought if I left quickly enough, he continued, I could survive it. And did you? He considered the question honestly. No, he said. Something in Evelyn's face shifted then, not forgiveness, but the first crack in the wall surrounding it. A man approached to ask Julian about a project in Manhattan. Julian apologized without listening. The man retreated politely. Evelyn almost smiled. You're still rude when you're uncomfortable. And you still notice everything. Yes. Is that exhausting? For other people? Often. The corner of his mouth lifted. There she was, not memory, not fantasy, herself, older now, sadder perhaps, but unmistakably herself. Do you ever think, Julian asked carefully, about what would have happened if I'd stayed? Evelyn looked toward the rain-dark windows. All the time, she said. The honesty of it nearly undid him. She exhaled slowly. That's the worst part of aging, she continued. You can survive almost anything except the lives you could have had. Julian felt something tighten painfully in his chest. Are you happy? He asked. With David? With your life. Evelyn took longer to answer than he expected. Yes, she said finally. Then, after a pause, but not completely. The orchestra stopped. Applause spread through the room in warm, scattered waves. People began drifting toward the dining hall beyond the gallery. Evelyn glanced toward the doorway. We're seated at different tables, she said. Julian nodded, though disappointment arrived instantly and irrationally. Of course. She studied him one more time. Older men often became transparent with longing. She could see now that Julian had not escaped that fate. His face still carried intelligence, charm, remnants of beauty. But beneath all of it lived exhaustion, regret worn smooth by time, and loneliness that surprised her most. You still wear the same cologne, she said quietly. He blinked. You remember that? I remember everything about you I wish I'd forgotten. Neither moved. The crowd continued around them, flowing steadily toward dinner. Finally, Evelyn stepped back. There's a cafe on Berkeley Street, she said, near the old theater. Julian felt his heart beat slow and deepen. I know it. I go there on Sunday mornings. He said nothing, not yet daring to understand. 9 o'clock, she said, usually. Then she turned and walked toward the dining hall before he could answer. Julian remained where he was, watching her disappear into the crowd. At 68 years old, with rain striking softly against the museum windows and applause still echoing faintly through the gallery, Julian realized with absolute clarity that the most dangerous moment of his life had not happened in youth. It had happened now. After everything. When there was still just enough time left to destroy himself for love one final time.